Welcome to the Power Factor Show. Episode 142. Sponsored by Rainier Ballistics, Hodgdon Powders, and JPL Precision.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Power Factor. Today we are here again at the Renton Fish and Game Club, and we are doing a shotgun episode. The subject of this week's episode is basically using the trap and skeet ranges of your local gun club as a means for practicing for hunting. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what's sometimes called Pasture clays, which is a hand trap thrower. But the idea basically is that you can come out and you can shoot trap or you can shoot skeet at most of your clubs, but the problem is it's very restrictive about how you're shooting or what you're doing, and it doesn't really replicate what you normally would get into in terms of practice for actually field shooting or hunting. The point being is that, as an example, on trap, you're standing in a single position, you're pre-mounted, guns out there, you call for the bird, there's no surprise element to it whatsoever. You're basically in a perfect shooting position. Bird takes off from the trap house and you shoot it. Same thing sort of in skeet is that, we talked before about how the skeet, really the idea behind skeet was practice for hunting. And there's a lot of really good angles that you see in skeet, but the way skeet has evolved today is that people will go out, you stand up in a specific position, a lot of people will shoot from a pre-mounted position again with the gun rather than a low position with the gun. And it really, the angles and whatnot help for hunting, but the method that you go about doing it really doesn't replicate what you would see in hunting. And hunting is really dynamic. Now, if you hunt with dogs, it's a little bit different. I never hunted with a dog for all the years that I was hunting. We had a dog. It was a French poodle. Doesn't work very well for hunting. So in my case, I kind of was the hunting dog of the family. My dad and I never had dogs. We would go out. Our hunting was really always dynamic in that you weren't able to actually hold a bird or get a bird to hold it in a position like you can with dogs. You're walking along, it's usually always a surprise. The bird jumps and you got to be ready to shoot it. So what we kind of want to talk about today is applying the skeet field and applying the trap field to kind of replicate what you would actually do in a walk-up hunting technique. So this is going to be really restrictive here about what we're doing, and the point that I want to drive home here is that before you do any of what we're going to demonstrate here, you really need to get permission from the range master at the club that you're at to make sure this is okay. We're going to talk about the safety aspect of it. Basically, at all times, there's only 2 shells in the gun. The safety will be on at all times. Everybody who is doing this is behind the line. You have one person who's basically going to be pulling the trap or hitting the switch as a surprise to the shooter so that they don't know when the bird's going to be coming out. And the shooter is walking at this point while we do this, either along in here in trap field, you walk along the pad toward the trap house, or in skeet, there's kind of 2 different ways you can go about doing this, and we'll demonstrate both. But there's concern about where the muzzle's pointed at. You need to change kind of the game for a right-handed shooter versus a left-handed shooter for part of it. And these are really all the safety dynamics that you need to be aware of. But the real thing is you need to get permission from your range master before attempting to do any of this, because we're talking about something that is not standard at all, what you normally would see in a trap field. You need to definitely get a dedicated trap field for when you're doing this so you wouldn't be a distraction to anybody else. In theory, what you can do is walk all the way out to the trap house before somebody could pull the bird. The surprise idea is that you don't know when they're going to pull it, so you don't want to actually have a single, only pull it between here and here, because you know when you're getting close to the end spot, they're going to be pulling the bird. In theory, we're not going to walk out beyond a trap house and have somebody pull a bird. It's going to be pulled before then. But that's the idea here, is that it's basically a big surprise when you pull the bird, but we're doing something totally different than what you normally would do in a trap field. I would highly recommend that when you do this for trap, you actually use a dedicated trap field for doing this. Today, we're using a Continental trap machine. Now, we talked before about what Continental trap is. Continental trap, the birds are being thrown about 50-55 miles an hour, and they're being thrown at a lot harder angles than you normally would see in a trap machine. And a trap machine, you know, the birds are around 40-45, somewhere in there. Technically 45 I think is the right number, but you know the angles always are out and pretty flat. In Continental, they'll throw the birds literally on the ground or up in the air. Now that's even better for replicating hunting because you really don't know what angle a pheasant is going to jump out. And the trap mechanism of this really more replicates pheasant hunting. The skeet field more replicates more of a passing bird like dove, quail, something like that, or pigeons or whatnot. Every once in a while in pheasant hunting, you'll get crossing birds. I mean, we've all seen crossing birds that come out of nowhere in pheasant. But the trap field really replicates the pheasant hunting aspect better. But the idea though is that pheasants don't jump out of the ground at 55 miles an hour. So it makes it a lot more difficult there to actually, you know, really simulate what we're doing here. So if you get good at this, you're going to even be better off when it comes to hunting in the field. In terms of chokes, what I would recommend here for your trap field is go as tight as you can. You put 2 rounds in the gun, and when the bird jumps or when they pull the bird, if you miss it with the first one, shoot it with the second one. So that's the reason why I'm recommending, if you're shooting an over-under, to probably choke as high as you can go. So I'm going to be probably shooting an improved, modified, and a full for my 2 chokes. If you're shooting a pump or a semi-auto or a single barrel gun effectively, you can kind of decide whether you want to go improved, mod, or full, somewhere in there. But the idea is, you know, you're walking along, and in theory you start all the way back at the 27-yard line and walk out. Well, your evil buddy could decide to pull it from the 27-yard line on you. That's a long shot, so you're going to want to have as tight a choke as possible. But in theory, again, you can get all the way out to the house and you may pull it. Now you're really massively over choked. So it's kind of a trade-off either way how you look at it. But that's the general idea here, what you're going to be doing on trap. For pasture clays, using a hand trap thrower, which we'll kind of talk a little bit about how you can kind of use that too for practice. You're going to want to go with a lot more open choke, something maybe like an improved cylinder or mod, because the birds are really being thrown close to you and not at a lot of speed. For skeet field, what we'll be talking or demonstrating, and probably recommend your standard skeet or improved cylinder choke for doing that, because we're going to be pretty close to the birds. They'll be no further out than what they normally do if you're shooting skeet. So that's basically the idea there behind that. So we'll start here and get moving with this, and hope you enjoyed the program. For a lot of us who start out in hunting, we all probably start out using the same mechanism or method, unless you're really fortunate to start out on a trap or skeet field. But it's sometimes often called pasture clay shooting. The idea is you go out to your favorite gravel pit or some farmer's field or whatever, and you get yourself one of the old, or I should say one of the new, plastic hand trap throwers. And I don't know about you, but I tried using those things before, and they last for a little bit, and then the things kind of get spread, and they don't hold the birds very well, and they don't last particularly very long. You guys have probably seen this before. This is probably a 1950s vintage Remington hand trap thrower that was handed down to me from my father. Sometimes the old stuff really works out well, and it keeps on working well. But the idea here is that, and this is how my dad and I would start out, is we go out to a gravel pit, and you can kind of really, to a certain degree with one of these things, change or demonstrate or kind of experiment with different birds, the way birds, clay pigeons, and getting them to fly different ways. So you can hook them, you can throw them high, you can throw them flat. For a right-handed person, it's kind of difficult to try to hook left, because the way this thing kind of works, if you haven't seen it, is kind of like a tennis racket. The motion is a forward stroke, but you need to stop and snap your wrist as you do it. Well, for a right-handed person trying to come forward and snap forward like this to hook it to the left, it doesn't work really well. More often than not, you'll shoot the thing straight into the ground. However, for a right-handed person, getting it to hook right is really easy, because you can come through kind of like sidearm or submarine style if you're into baseball, and get it to come up and go out like that. The other thing is that we would simulate either, we'd have our pheasant bird or a dove, and my dad and I shot or hunted both pheasants, dove, and Hungarian partridge in Washington State. But doves are typically usually really high in the air, coming at you, crossing shots and whatnot. The problem is you can't really throw a crossing shot with one of these things. However, I can tell you that we did play around once. We found a place where we could throw clay pigeons at where there was a berm that was out there that was safe. The person could be on the other side of the berm, throw the bird up, so it was kind of sort of like an incoming bird at you. We only did that once or twice, but typically dove have some elevation and are crossing on you, and this doesn't really replicate that very well, but it does replicate pheasant very well in that most of your pheasants are, again, flushing or coming away from your standing position. So I'm going to probably just select one or two of these things here for you. You can kind of see maybe the different angles I can get. I'll try maybe throw one straight away, maybe one hook left, one hook right, and you can kind of see how it plays out. So I'll grab a bird here, and it goes something. I'm going to basically try to throw a straightaway bird here once. So just like that. So that's a good representation of a pheasant flying straight away from you. I'm going to try to hook one right here. This shouldn't be too hard. So there's a right. That was pretty low, but general idea. And I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to throw one left here, but I'll try it. So I got to really kind of go overhand with this thing. Okay, well that actually didn't work out too bad. A little bit high. And then what we would do for our dove shots is basically take them and just throw them really sky high like that to get some altitude on it, and try to let the guy shoot it. So we'll go through here and do a couple of these real quick. And again, the idea is that you don't know the guy who's throwing these things of how he's going to throw them and where he's going to throw them, so they're going to be a surprise. But I can tell you that if the person who's throwing them is inexperienced and you're out there for the very first time, and again, the person needs to be behind you when they do this, you need to watch out that you don't catch a clay pigeon in your right ear when you do this, because early story here, when one of the very first times my wife and I went out shooting, she didn't understand the whole entire mechanism very well, and there were quite a few times that I had clay pigeons that were just like right across the front of me. So at any rate, let the person probably throw a couple without you shooting, without you being in position, so they can get the feel for it, and then go out there rather than letting them say, you know, okay, go ahead and throw it, and all of a sudden you catch one in the side of your head. So not a pleasant experience. I'm not going to tell you how I'd know that. Okay, so same thing here is that, again, to replicate the fact that you're moving while hunting, and you always are unless you're hunting over dogs, which we talked earlier about. I am going to, again, and the critical thing here is as you're doing this, you want to make sure that the gun is always on safe and is empty until you're ready to go ahead and shoot. Safety, again, is everything, and you want to basically do the same thing that you would do if you're in the field hunting. The gun is empty until you get into the draw or the field that you're going to be hunting at. As you get out of the car, again, empty gun, all that stuff, you get yourself set up, load the gun, safety goes on, or safety goes on and load the gun, and then you go ahead and begin your hunt. So what I'm going to do here in this case is that I'm going to start walking forward. I'm going to have my thrower stay behind me and walk forward with me so I don't catch a bird in the back of the head, hopefully. And again, it'll be a surprise of where that bird's going. I mean, he doesn't know where it's going. I don't know where it's going, so it'll be a surprise for everybody. It may go high, may go low. We'll see. So I'm going to load 2 shells here. And the only reason I'm loading 2 shells, obviously they can't throw doubles. That's one of the other things here with a hand trap thrower, is that, you know, you can't throw doubles. And you see some of the ones that, you know, the ones that you put in the ground that, yes, you can throw doubles, but those things are fixed in the ground and you can't really do a whole lot with those things other than stand in a position and throw birds. You know where they're coming from. So again, I'm going to load 2 shells just in case if I miss it with the first one, I want to be able to shoot it with the second one. That's the only reason why I'm loading 2. But I was really confident I'd only be loading 1. So again, safety is on, and we'll see how this works out. So again, whenever I'm doing this, I'm carrying the gun in a field safe carry position. So the gun is basically just as if I was carrying while hunting. Muzzle is up and pointed downrange at all times. Okay. Okay, so since I only took 1 round on that, I'm going to empty the gun and then walk back, flip the safety on, walk back, keep the muzzle in a safe direction, and then do it again. Now for those of you, again, if you're using an autoloader or a semi-auto, you'll want to make sure, again, that the gun has a chamber open as you're walking back and the muzzles are in a safe direction, pointed up, and I would probably say, you know, 90 degrees to downrange. I don't want to see anybody walking back, you know, like this with a gun pointed this way, because a lot of times I've seen it where people will get lazy. It's like, oh, hi, Fred, and they'll drop their muzzle down or whatever, and all of a sudden, you know, you've got a gun pointed And again, just because the action's open, a lot of people don't know that. I mean, it's assumed that you walk around with the action open, but we want to make sure the action is open and the gun is pointed in a good, safe direction as you do it. So again, I'm going to load up 2 shells here. Just in case if I miss with the first one, I've got a second one to go with. Okay. Okay, again, so that was more like a dove, a higher bird, which is good. And the thing, a lot of times, that if you're out practicing for hunting, pheasants throw pheasant birds, flat angles, hook right, hook left. If you're out throwing doves, I've yet to see a dove that flushes and comes out from you. They're typically always high and crossing, and that's where skeet will really come into play. So if you like, I guess the point being is that if you're out practicing for pheasant hunting, make sure you're throwing pheasant type birds. If you're out practicing for dove hunting, for dove type birds. But in this case here, we're just having fun. They're going wherever they go. It's, from my standpoint, the more of a surprise, the better it is. It makes me a better shooter. So again, safety is on. We'll close it, and we'll do it again. And we'll pull that top shell out, and again, walk back with an empty gun, safety on. And that's basically the idea behind Pasture clays, is that, you know, you're having your friend throw the thing, being safe, you walking with a loaded gun, safety on, just as if you were walking through a field where you don't know when or where the birds are coming from, so that when they do come, the clay pigeons in this case, it's a surprise of where it's coming from, where it's going, and when it's coming. So you can react to it. So a lot of this is just reaction shooting, as opposed to like trap or skeet, where you get yourself set up and you use the whole entire sustained lead mechanism in skeet, or kind of swing through or pass through or fall through, or whatever you want to call it, in trap. This is really instinctive. You see the bird, you put the gun where it needs to be, and basically kill it. So it's a little bit different, but it's really good practice to go out and learn to shoot that way. A lot of times we get hung up on shooting only trap. You see guys who go out here, they'll shoot trap, they can shoot like 23, 24, 25. They go out in the field with a field gun, they can't hit anything. It's in the air, that they don't know where it's coming from, because they're just so conditioned to shooting from a pre-mounted position, knowing where the bird's going. When all of a sudden they got to react to it, they can't react to it. So as we mentioned before, safety is really paramount in what we're doing here, because this is a lot more dynamic than what you normally would do in typical trap or skeet shooting. In trap or skeet, again, you're standing there in a pre-mounted position, usually with the safety off. You're like this, you call for the bird, it flies, you shoot it. In this case here, we're walking with a loaded gun, so we got to make sure that we're replicating everything that you would do when you're hunting in the field. When you're hunting in the field, you carry the gun in a field carry position, safety on, and the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. So what you're going to see here is that as I'm walking forward, I'm going to flip the safety on the gun, and I'm carrying the gun basically in a field carry position. This is the way I would carry again if I'm in the field, so I can easily move to wherever the bird is. The thing here is you got to react to where the bird's coming from and where the bird's going. After you shoot, after you get done shooting your pair of birds, whether it's one bird or 2 birds, and that's really up to the evil person. In this case today, the evil person is John. John is being my evil trap puller, so I have no clue what John is going to be pulling on me. But at any rate, when you're done shooting, break the gun open, clear it, and walk back with the gun pointed in a safe direction. Over under, you want to break the gun open, walk back, and start all over again. If you're shooting an autoloader or a pump or whatever, break the gun open. In other words, open chamber, and carry the gun back into with the muzzle pointed up in a field carry position, and be really careful not to sweep anybody or the rest of the group that you're with. That's really critical. The other thing is that the guy who's pulling needs to stay behind the shooter as they're doing this. It's really critical that everybody, from the point where the shooter starts moving forward, everybody else is downrange or behind the shooter as you go through this process. So again, this is really important that you follow this safety aspect here of what we're doing, because we don't want anybody to get hurt. And again, let your range master know what you're doing here, about how you're going to proceed, what you're going to do, so you don't basically disturb them or cause them any grief, because again, what you're doing here from a club standpoint, may represent a little bit of a liability. They don't normally have people who are moving on a trap range or on a skeet range, because typically a lot of times they'll say you cannot move off the pad. You cannot move off the pad with a loaded gun. In skeet, that's one of the requirements. You can't step into the pad with a loaded gun. You step into the pad, then you load the gun. So we're kind of really doing something, definitely out of the ordinary here. So I'll demonstrate here kind of what we're talking about, but the idea is you start back, normally at the 27-yard line, you walk forward out toward the trap house, the guy pulls the target whenever he feels like it, 1 or 2, no more than that, and then you break it open, you step back and do it all over again. Now, since I'm shooting on the Continental field today, and again, these birds are moving 10 miles an hour faster than anything else, I'm gonna start probably around 20 yards, because there's no way I'm gonna hit anything with this 27 yards out to where these birds are flying. Continental trap is all shot from the 16-yard line, so basically anything that's before that, I'm already at a disadvantage. The other thing is I'm shooting from a field carry position with a safety on, so now I've got to mount the gun and flip the safety off, and remember to do that. That's even more time than the bird's getting out there. So we'll go through here and give you a couple of demonstrations here of what this is all about. Okay, so I'm starting here from the middle line, and the idea here in all this is that you can start and probably use any one of the trap lines that you have here. And obviously, different lines are going to present different angles, so you probably really want to kind of work on all of them. But again, I'm back here at about the 20-yard line here. Gun is safe at this point. There's no shells in it. I'm going to load 2 shells, flip the safety on, and then start my walk out toward the trap house here. And then John will decide when and if he feels like how many birds he's going to pull and when he's going to pull them. So we'll see how this works out. Okay, so my safety is on. Gun is in a safe field carry position, and I'm just going to start walking, and we'll see what happens when John pulls them. Okay, so after you shoot, break the gun open, flip the safety back on, walk back, do it again. So I'm going to start at this line over here this time, basically just exploring different lines. Okay, so we'll put 2 more rounds in the gun, and again the safety will go on. Safety is on. Again, make sure you're carrying the gun in a field carry position and start walking, just like as if you were out hunting. Okay, again, safety goes on. Step back. Let's take this line here. So again here, we're going to go and just walk forward here and let John pull when he feels like it. So 2 rounds in. Safety's on. Fingers in the safety. Okay, so since I only fired 1 round, I'm pulling both rounds out of the gun to make sure I'm never walking with a round in the gun at all, anywhere. Safety is back on. I'll come back over here. In fact, let's go take off and go walk along station 1 over here, pad 1, and we'll try it again. 2 rounds in. Again, safety on. Muzzle is in safe direction. Start walking. That's 2 dead pheasants.
Now he'll talk.
I guess we get to eat tonight. And again, safety's always on after you do this. Unload again as you walk back, or in the case of an autoloader or a pump, make sure that gun is open, action open, and carry the gun again up. And I would not recommend carrying it back like this as you're walking back toward the line, because people can tend to get sloppy and drop a muzzle, and that's a bit scary. So again, let's pretend I'm carrying an autoloader or a semi-auto. I'm going to walk back with the gun like this, basically just so the muzzle is up in a safe direction as I'm walking back. Okay, so here we are in skeet. Same idea here for a quail walk, but you need to be a little more concerned about safety. There's 2 variations on quail walk in the skeet field that you can do. One variation is that you start on either pad 2 or pad 6, and you follow the semicircle around from one pad to the other one. Now the requirement here is that if you're a right-handed shooter, you have to start on pad 2 and walk to pad 6. The reason being is that from a safety standpoint, or muzzle safety, is that when I'm field carrying the gun, again, empty chambers here, when I'm field carrying the gun, I'm carrying it with the muzzles this way as if I was walking, you know, in a field or whatever. If I'm a right-handed shooter and I'm standing over there on pad 6, where's my muzzle pointed? Back down range, and we can't have that. So if you're a left-handed shooter, you start on pad 6. If you're a right-handed shooter, you start on pad 2 and follow the semicircle around. Again, the same idea is that the guy who's pulling birds can pull them whenever he feels like it. Now the other thing to take into consideration is that if you're out pheasant hunting or pheasant birds are always basically flushing away from you, or in some cases a quartering or angled shot, or sometimes a perfect crossing shot. But I've yet to see a pheasant ever come at me from any place in the field. They're always going away from me. So as an example, if I'm walking the circle this way, it doesn't really make any sense to throw any birds from the low house here, because now you've got pheasants coming at you. I'll make an exception to that. If you live in Britain and you're doing driven pheasant hunts where you're standing below and the pheasants are being driven at you, usually what happens there is you're standing in a gully and the drivers or whatever are beating the brush above, and the pheasants come flying over your head straight at you, but that's a little different game. So again, if you're out here replicating pheasant hunting, doesn't really make any sense to have a bird coming at you. If you're out here replicating, say, dove hunting, pigeon hunting, quail to a certain degree, yeah, I've seen those birds come at you from all different angles, and yes, it would make sense. Again, there's only 2 shells in the gun whenever we do this during any of the shooting, and safety again is on always, and the muzzle is pointed in a safe direction. The other variation on this is that you start on pad 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 and walk toward the center stake and have the birds pulled. So now you're looking at basically surprise, crossing, or quartering shots. So we'll kind of do both here a little bit to let you see kind of how both variations play out and how you might use this to improve your bird hunting. Okay, so we're going to start doing the semicircle walk here first. To do that, demonstrating again, I'm right-handed shooter, so I'm going to be walking toward from 2 to 6. And again, the guy can pull these things whenever and wherever he feels like it. So he may decide to wait until you get all the way over to 6. He may decide to pull it when you get 5 feet off of station 2, or the middle of the field, or wherever. But the idea is, again, that you're walking, again, with a loaded gun. Gun is pointed downrange, fingers off the trigger, safety is on, only 2 rounds in the gun. If you miss the first bird, and again, he can pull 1 bird, he can pull 2 birds, he can pull two birds out of, let's say, the high house, so you have 2 going away. He can pull 2 birds out of the low house, so you have 2 coming at you. He can pull a high and a low. It's up to him to decide whatever he wants to do, depending on how much he really wants to screw with you. But again, it's only 2 rounds in the gun at any given time while we're doing this. After you're done, you break the gun open, keep the muzzle again pointed safe downrange, flip the safety on, come back, restage, and do it all over again. So my safety is on right now. Gonna load 2 in the gun. Muzzle pointed downrange, finger off the trigger, thumb on the safety, and we'll start our walk and see what happens here. And again, I'm looking downrange just because I don't know when these birds are coming, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so that's 2 birds, empty gun, flip the safety back on, step back. He didn't let me get very far on that one. I only got, what, 2 or 3 steps, so we'll try this again. Okay, safety's on. Okay, I'm gonna break it. Load another one, safety back on, continue my walk. Damn, missing lots of birds here. Okay, break it. And I'm gonna empty the gun at this point. Safety goes back on, I'm gonna walk back with a muzzle pointed downrange. And we'll do this one more time and see if I can't get a little bit better on hitting birds. Okay, safety's on. Okay, I'm going to put 2 rounds more in, just continue my walk here. Safety goes back on, let's see what happens. Okay, 2 more rounds in. I don't have very far to go to station 6, so I have a feeling I'm going to get something pretty quick here. Ah! Safety's back on. Okay, empty gun. I'm here at station 6, so I'm walking back. Okay, so this variation here is that we're walking basically out to the center stake. I'm going to walk out, again, 2 shots, and rather than what I did before on the semicircle walk of reloading and moving again, I'm going to walk out after I shoot 2 or 1 if I hit it, or 2 if he throws 2 birds. I'll walk back, unload the gun, again, observing the muzzle safety, walk back, and start either this position or go to another position, do the same thing again. But the idea here, safety's on, is that I'm walking straight out to a predefined spot. In this case, I'm just using the center stake, and we'll see what happens here in terms of birds coming at me. Okay, so that was 2 perfectly nice hit doves. That never happens. Been out dove hunting, you know how hard those things are to hit. So I'm going to start here with station 3, and we'll do the same thing. So in that case there, I stayed with the bird. I missed it in the first one, but then picked it up in the second one. Again, as I'm walking back, muzzle is safe, either up here or over your shoulder in the case of an over-under, broken open, or in the case of a semi-auto or pump, make sure the chamber is open. Let's do this again over here from station 4 or station 5. And it's important that if you end up missing on your first shot, to stick with the bird and pick it up with a second shot, because you just don't know when that's going to happen. You want to basically make sure you don't get into, 1 shot per bird or whatever. Just keep moving with the bird. If you miss it in the first one, keep moving with it and try to pick it up in the second shot. Okay, so here we go. So I have no clue where this bird's coming from. Ah, blew that one. Okay, let's do that one again. And that's the thing here, is that you're walking, it'll catch you off your feet. I mean, you're not normally in a perfect planted position. That bird comes out and you may be contorted, and you know that from field hunting, that's happens sometimes, of not getting yourself perfectly squared up to the bird and being able to take a good shot. And part of the time, that's just it, of trying to get yourself into a good position. All right. So there's an empty gun. We'll move over here to station 5 and do it again. And as you can see, the closer you get out there to the center line, all of a sudden these birds are really going almost right straight across you, so you don't have a whole lot of time to react to them. Okay, I'm breaking that. We're too far out here, so let's step back. Do it again. Okay. So So that was a good cross double there, because you never know when that's going to happen. You get kind of crossing coveys that somebody may go one way and somebody go right, or just like a total flush of all the birds. But you can see, I don't know if you noticed here on the right hand target, I was really twisted and offline and didn't realize the next bird was going to be thrown, and all of a sudden I see a streak movement, the other bird flying away from me. So you got to kind of get here to the point of reacting. But the thing here is that you're not going to be able to hit all these birds perfectly, because as you've been out hunting, you don't know when these birds are going to flush, and more often than not when you're walking and you're in a kind of somewhat bad position, you don't have your feet perfectly square to take the perfect shot. So you just got to kind of wing it, so to speak. So we'll go over here and do station 6, probably call it good, and see how that works out. Okay, safety's on, and we'll see how this works out. So I have no clue where these birds are coming from. Do that again. So you can see here, as I'm walking back, I'm making sure the gun is safely downrange, not coming back and around or anything like that. So I hope that helps you with some of your field hunting and gives you some ideas of things you can go off and experiment with. Again, you really need to clear this with your range master. Not all guys are going to let you do this, and if they say no, so be it. But again, it's really important that you clear this with them before they even will consider letting you go off and do this. And again, safety is really the utmost concern here. As you do this, you want to make sure at all times that you're being muzzle aware. The gun is safe. We're walking with a loaded shotgun. Of course, all you guys who are shooting IPSC and IEP is like, oh yeah, we're running around with loaded handguns and the safety's off on them most of the time. I understand that, but from the shotgun aspect, they're not used to anybody moving with the loaded shotgun. We're doing the same thing that you would be doing in hunting, but again, from a range safety standpoint, they just simply may not allow it. But at any rate, oh yeah, that one's for Steve Koski at any rate. Apparently, from what I heard at the IDPA championship, somebody just had him imitate me or whatever, and he threw it at any rate. So there you go. As usual, if you have any comments or questions, you can hit the website at powerfactorshow@gmail.com, email at powerfactorshow@gmail.com. And if I was Rick right now, I'd say, and if you're into Facebook, you can go to Facebook, but no, I actually do know what it is. It's facebook.com/powerfactorshow. So again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.